All right, welcome. Welcome, everyone. So we're having a couple technical challenges, but we're almost there. So welcome to this SBIR session. So we have this once a quarter. So thank you for being here. We have several people online as well, so we'll make sure we address their need as well. So I'll get started, and then we'll have a series of speakers. So you have a chance to ask questions along the way, but ultimately also at the end, we have a big chunk of time at the end to really get all the speakers that we have here, whether they're online or in person, to ask them personal questions. So we'll get started. So let me tell you a little bit about, so my name is Jacques Shirazi. I'm a director of Entrepreneurship Center and the basement here. We're doing this SBIR sessions here at UCSD in partnership with the Brink Center at University of San Diego. So we're doing this for some time. So we're excited to have them back here. So thank you, the Brink Center. So I'll go quickly a little bit about where I fall in within the UC system. I work for the Office of Innovation and Commercialization. And basically, we're kind of the place where we do all the commercialization for the university. So we're responsible for a lot of tech transfer. So any of you are doing any kind of research and you're ready to disclose an invention, you probably will talk to some of my colleagues. And then from there, hopefully we'll get you to be able to license the technology either yourself, or maybe we find a partner for you out there that would work with you. So we do this for the campus-wide. The group that I'm in, I'm mainly focused on helping students, and welcome, by the way, to the center. This is actually the basement. This is an incubator for students, but we teach students, faculty, researchers, and staff how to potentially take companies forward, and we have a number of programs that we do so. So we serve, obviously, the campus-wide, but also we're here to help companies. If any of you have ever been in the fourth floor of this building, so this is the DIB, ground floor. Upstairs, we have this amazing makerspace. Then we have a Friends and Design Lab. The fourth floor is also our office. We have what's called Entrepreneurship Center. We have 28 ventures up there. Some of them are licensed technology from the university that we're helping scale. And what we're doing upstairs is mainly getting ready for investments. The one step might be getting your grants first. And we're happy to share this later on. This is kind of the ecosystem on campus. There's a lot of centers. Actually, there's probably something like 14 different centers on campus that are helping faculty, researcher, and some level students to go from this ideation or from starting an innovative idea and forward. And that's just for you. And you may recognize some of these programs. Some are specific around proof of concepts, or really focused on getting you closer to market. And some are mainly about innovation space that we have on campus. Okay. Oh, not good. For 1 second. Stop sharing, sorry. So it'll be 1 second, sorry about that. This one? Actually, maybe it's this one. Let's see if it makes a difference. Yeah, I'm just trying to make it bigger. This one, right?
Try that one. Yeah. That's the one.
Yes. Is it working? Sorry, everyone. We're having technical issues. I don't know why it's causing this. We'll just do this thing. Screen. Entire screen, no?
Try that.
Yeah. Right, sorry about that. Thank you. So I'll go quickly so we get to the actual real content. This is the ecosystem that we have. This is really the process where you were going to commercialize any innovations. I'm happy to tell you more at the end, but this is what we have established over time. Just a quick plug, if you're interested in startup formation and investment, we actually have a speaker tomorrow coming in. He's an attorney, and we've been working with them for a while, but he's going to be talking about investment related. So how do you raise capital and how do you get your investment ready from a legal standpoint? And this is just another plug. We have our demo day of all the startups that we have here on campus in this program. So that's going to be May 22nd. If you want to come and see what the upcoming generation of students are working on, you're welcome to come. Maybe we'll show that later on. You want to go next? So I'll introduce Stefan. Yeah, Stefan's going to talk about the Brink Center.
All right. Okay. Great. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Stephen Flynn. I'm the interim director at the Brink SBDC. So we're a small business development center here in San Diego. It's a network of economic development programs here to help you start and grow your small businesses. This session in partnership with UCSD. We're down at University of San Diego, so just south of here. And just before we get started with all of our great speakers today, if everyone here could just real quick scan this QR code. All it is just first, last name, and whether or not you're a UC San Diego student. This really helps us out. It helps keep all our programming no cost to you. Just continue our operations. Yeah. So thanks so much. And everyone online, just by coming into the Zoom meeting, you've already done your part, so no worries there. Okay, thank you. Like I said, my name is Stephen Flynn. I'm the interim director for the Brink. Jacques Shirazi graciously has us in this space today here at the basement. And we've got some speakers here for the SBIR Info Advising Session, a great lineup today. So what is the Brink SBDC? As I mentioned, we're a small business development center at the University of San Diego. And what we do is we primarily provide free one-on-one advising and training to help innovative founders access capital and build investable companies. That's our goal. Our whole goal is as a nonprofit organization, we're generating economic impact in San Diego and Imperial counties. We're partnered we're funded by the SBA, the Cal SBA, state and federal grant funding to help you start and grow your small businesses. That QR code will take you to our registration link where we can get you paired up with one of our business advisors, and that's free, confidential, unlimited advising. Also, all of these slides will be shared out to all of you with pertinent links and things like that. So our follow-up email should be coming shortly. If you want to sign up for services or learn more about the basement, we'll send out a comprehensive email after this. So as I mentioned, our primary service is that one-on-one advising. We have training events like this, and we have instructors from our great advising team who teach those. But we've got a broad range of advisors that cover lots of different specialties, and they can help you in a lot of different areas with your startups or just your business ideas you're looking to turn into a real business. So you can see we've got a large advising team. They're all excellent. And if you register with us, we can help you by getting you meetings with these folks. They're all great. This is the range of services that we offer. We have all kinds of training programs. We have our Lean Essential Sprint, which kind of helps you build the basics. We've got our legal office hours for specific questions about legal topics for your startup. We've got this SBIR Info and Advising Session, which is actually paired sort of with our SBIR writing group. You're going to hear from Matt Hutton, who actually teaches that program. It's a great program to kind of get you through the SBIR process and on your way. As I mentioned, we've got that coming up. We really encourage you, if you're interested in getting an SBIR, working through one. This is a 4-week virtual series. It's an hour and a half on Mondays. Like I said, it's taught by Matt Hutton. Again, that's the registration link, the QR code to sign up. It's starting April 28th, so coming up. We encourage you to sign up if you're interested. And as I mentioned, Matt Hutton will be speaking, so you can ask him questions about SBIR or this program, really any questions you've got. Finally, I just encourage you, please follow us on LinkedIn. We share a lot of great info about startup events or training programs we're putting on. If you want to stay connected, please follow us on LinkedIn. Again, you'll have these slides afterwards. Now, I think I want to turn it over to, I think Matt Hutton is next. He'll be talking about the SBIR program sort of in general. Matt, are you here with us on the call?
I am. Can you hear me? Hello?
I can't hear you.
Oh,
Are you able to hear me? Check, check, check.
want to try that again, Matt?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We're just going to turn you up a bit.
Oh, perfect.
All right. Take it away.
All right. Yeah, well, thanks for that introduction, Stefan and Jacques. And I am gonna, do you have the slides? Or I can pull them up here too.
Yeah, if you could just pull them up, that'd be great.
Yeah, all right. Let me share my screen real quick. Okay. Okay, and then into presenter view. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that. Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction. Thank you for having me. And yeah, as Stefan said, I will be starting the SBIR class this coming Monday. That'll be a 4-week class talking through basically your first SBIR phase 1 or phase 2 application. And kind of, going through it as a team to get some co-learning going on, lessons learned from others who have applied before, and yeah, just kind of get your creative juices going. So today, I'm just going to do a really brief kind of intro to the SBIR programs. The SBIR programs are really the key way that the federal government gets money out into the economy for small businesses to do innovative things. So if you're involved in research and development of some new product or service, odds are there's an SBIR out there for you. This program was founded in 1982, established by an act of Congress. And at that point, basically what Congress said was, there are lots of large contractors doing all sorts of research, and universities doing all sorts of research, but we would like to spur the innovation economy. So they basically did a set aside from every federal agency that actually has an extramural research budget and said, such and such a percent needs to be allocated towards small businesses innovating in this space. So the stated goal, so this is across the federal executive branch, a number of different agencies. The goal of the program is to fund a diverse portfolio of startups and small businesses across technology areas and markets to stimulate technological innovation meet federal research and development needs, and increase commercialization to transition R&D into impact. I think this is informative, and it's a little dense, so I just want to kind of dig in to a few of the key words and phrases here. So the first is diverse. Basically, what they're getting at here is they don't want just the same contractors doing the same R&D um, every time they need something developed. So they want to get new people into the R&D pipeline, new researchers, small businesses, and really kind of grow a healthy ecosystem of innovative companies. So that means, not only the individuals doing the work, but also diverse geographies. So all throughout the United States and throughout the federal, the congressional districts. Um, and then diverse technologies. So they want people looking at things in different ways, developing, technologies that may have different approach to the same problem, for example. So that's really what they mean by diversity. You should approach the SBIR programs thinking about how you can set yourself apart from others who may be incumbents in this space. Okay, small business. So this is a requirement of the SBIR programs. The intention is to fund small businesses and help them become profitable. So you are required to be a small business, to register as a small business. The definition of that varies a little bit agency to agency, but really it can be anything from like a single founder garage scale to maybe 50 or 100 people, something on that order. But pretty broad definition. Okay, but it's not large companies that you're competing with. It is these kind of smaller businesses and in many cases individuals. All right, so third thing is technological innovation. Innovation is the key here, okay? And the different agencies, they may define it a little bit differently, but across the board, you're gonna need to approach this program and be able to explain why you're doing something that's new and different. That really kind of connotes some level of risk. So you should be prepared to explain how you're doing something that, for example, an incumbent in the space, a large contractor, has not done yet because it's risky, it's an alternative approach, in many cases, scientifically innovative. Now, the bar for what risk is and what innovative is, it varies agency to agency. So in some cases, it just might mean the development of a product that doesn't exist in the market. In other cases, at different agencies, it may be breaking really new ground in terms of the science that you're doing, so more fundamental science. All right, but that's a kind of a key attribute of the SBIR program that you should go in with that in mind. Okay, the next thing I want to highlight, federal R&D needs. Okay, so the main thing to think about here is that you are responsive in the SBIR program to federal R&D needs. The R&D needs are set by the agencies on an annual or maybe triennial basis. So they're going to establish basically a list of technologies where they think innovation is needed, okay? And then you need to explain in response to that how you're going to innovate in that specific space. So it is not the case that you can go in, with some idea that doesn't necessarily fit with any of the agency needs. You need to be prepared to explain how it's going to fit in with the agency's stated goals. You are always responsive to the agency. Okay, then commercialization. What I want to highlight about the word commercialization is really the intended outcome of this program. Okay, so success for the SBIR program is if you can take your business and run with it. Really what they want to see is, not necessarily that you've met every single goal of the original, R&D effort of the new science, but that you're taking those federal dollars and using them to spin up some sort of business, get something going so that you can have an impact in this space, introduce some new blood into this area of the economy. Okay, and that's the metric that most of these SBIR programs are going to be evaluated on. Okay, from the agency side, is how many of these companies go on to have revenue in the future. Okay, last thing I want to highlight here, impact. All right, so what they mean by this is that you should have some impact in the economy. Again, the principal thing is that you're having an economic impact, that you're doing business by being innovative, but they really also would like to hear about the knock-on benefits of the technology that you're developing with federal dollars. So, for example, if the NSF is funding something, they are going to be interested in not only the initial target market, the initial application of what you're developing, but also could this be applied to other things down the road? Could it, cure some sort of disease that helps us reduce the number of missed school days for children throughout the US? These sorts of things beyond your ability to measure, okay, in your short timeline that you've got with the SBIR program, but they certainly want to hear about it. All right. Uh, so the project format is basically going to be the same across all the agencies with some slight differences. Um, they're going to again solicit projects about specific R&D or technical needs. You're responding to those, and then there's a three-phase project architecture. Okay, so a phase one SBIR, that's going to be 6 to 12 months to show technical merit. So you can think of this as a proof of concept project. You want to do a really concise, series of demonstrations or experiments or whatever to demonstrate that this is a promising technological avenue to walk down. Okay, and then the real prize is usually the phase two, which is a 1 to 2 year follow-on with more funding that you get to take and bring your innovation closer to commercialization. All right, there also is a phase three. Um, most of the agencies don't have specific funding allocated in their SBIR program for phase three. What a phase three SBIR is if they think this is a really valuable effort that you're doing, they will draft some funds in from another part of their budget, but house it under the SBIR programs, and that basically gets you the ability to retain the extremely strong IP protections that you have as an SBIR participant. Okay, so again, this all is oriented toward you starting your own business. The government wants to protect your IP. They don't want to own it. It's all for you developing these things and creating a business. So phase three, the purpose is really just to give you that assurance that your IP is going to be protected as you continue in the SBIR process. All right. Now, a little bit more on the flavors of SBIR. So as you go out and look at SBIR opportunities, you may see some of these terms, SBIR, STTR, and basically, these are kind of different variations on the theme. The SBIR is the original, the kind of standard thing. And the hallmark of this is that 2/3 of the effort needs to be done by your small business. Okay, so that usually is measured by budget. So 2/3 of the budget needs to be spent by the small business. The rest can go to university, to a nonprofit, to another company, to a vendor, whatever it is, but 2/3 by your business. There is also an STTR. So in many cases, you can apply either as an SBIR or as an STTR to the same opportunity. An STTR really just lets you get more money to a nonprofit. So a university or a hospital, teaching hospital or nonprofit lab that you're working with. That is the purpose of an STTR because, a lot of this research, especially the more fundamental stuff, the medical sciences, there's a big need for university participation. And so 2/3 spending by the small business can be a high bar to clear something. Okay. There are some direct to phase two opportunities, meaning you can apply for phase one and phase two at once, and then kind of go through those without doing a separate application for the phase two opportunity. Those opportunities are less common, but some of the agencies do tend to do them every year. And then TTO. So a TTO opportunity is basically where the government owns some IP, doesn't know what to do with it. And so they just kind of pitch it out there through the SBIR program and say, hey, if anybody can make a business out of this, take it and develop it into a project or product, we'd like to hear about how you commercialize it. And you can do that effort through an SBIR. Okay, so getting close to the end here. These are the 11 agencies. I just wanted to share the 11 agencies that actually offer SBIRs. Okay, and whether they offer grants or contracts. So the big difference here, a grant is going to be more like Traditional research, if you're coming from an academic background, the outcomes often are publications, are new science, still all oriented toward commercialization and product or service development. But, tends to be a little bit more toward the research sort of side of things in an academic sense. A contract usually has a more well-defined endpoint. So something that may be released or offered as a contract rather than a grant, SBIR, is something where, for example, the Department of Defense wants a specific tool to be built. Okay, maybe it's a laser that they need to etch something or something like that. And it doesn't exist, they need a company to develop this special tooling or capacity or something. And so they'll release it as an SBIR, very specific technological endpoint. Okay, so as you look at these 11 different agencies and whether they do grants, contracts, or both, you're thinking in terms of like how well defined is the endpoint of the project, what's the outcome going to be, and is it more researchy or more toward a specific product or service at the end. All right, and then just to kind of close it off, I wanted to share each of the agencies and their funding levels. So they all offer different levels of funding for these. Okay, but this is a table that shows all the different funding levels. You got the total budget. So what the total budget for each of these agencies is going to be their annual spending for the SBIR programs as a whole, inclusive of grants, contracts, SBIRs, STTRs, phase ones, phase twos, phase threes. So basically everything. And you can kind of get the idea here from looking at this that there are a couple big agencies that tend to take up most of the footprint. That's the DoD, the DOE, the NSF, and the Health and Human Services. All right, so it kind of drops off a little bit after that. Some sizable ones, NASA also pretty big, but those are going to be the large kind of participants in this program. And so if you're thinking as an applicant, where should I apply? You can start to look at the size of the programs and understand, what the competition might be, how many SBIRs they're actually going to issue each year. All right, so then I've got phase one funding, phase two funding here. So you can get a sense, most of them are in the, $150,000 to like $300,000 range for phase one. Again, the 6 month to 1 year projects, usually 9 months. And then the phase twos, again, kind of the bigger prize, they go up to like $2 million a year. All right. The other key thing to note here is the number of cycles per year. So the bigger agencies will tend to have opportunities more frequently. The Department of Defense, 3 cycles per year, meaning you have 3 chances per year to apply. The NSF does continuous applications all year. Some of the smaller participants, as far as agencies go, they're going to maybe just have 1 opportunity per year. All right. And then lastly, what are your odds? Overall, for NSF, they report about a 17% success for for all phase one applications. So 17% of the phase one applications will be funded every year. You can really kind of give yourself a leg up on that by just following all the instructions in the application. And then phase two, much higher success rate. So usually by the time you've gone through a phase one, you're going to have some sense how you're doing, how you're working with the agency. And the success rates for phase two applications, I've heard anything up from like 40 to 60% success rate if you're applying for a phase two. All right, so I'll close it off there. Again, this is my email address. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do that through the Brink. We also have the workshops beginning on Monday, and I do encourage you to register with the Brink and attend if you're interested in the SBIR programs. And I will stick around for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for going over this first part. So as Matt mentioned, we've designed this kind of info session in conjunction with this writing workshop that happens really close. So if you're about to think, okay, I'm going to apply for a grant, take advantage of that. That's really the mindset there that we had in place, and hopefully Matt could answer more questions. So thank you, Matt. Can you stop sharing so I could, introduce the
Yeah.
next speaker. So we're going to now move a step along this continuum of grants. I'm going to introduce Molly Wolford, who is from QI, and she's going to be talking about grant writing. So as you can realize, applying for a grant, there's a whole kind of a strategy, but there's also a process, and she's going to go over some key steps that you might not be aware or would like to potentially engage later on with questions. So let me pull up your PowerPoint. Sorry.
Can I just like sit here and talk, or do I have to stand?
Whatever you're comfortable.
Okay.
We have an issue with the camera, but it's totally fine. Whatever you think makes sense.
Where's the camera?
The camera is not working very well.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, if the camera's not working, I'm gonna sit and chat. This is the clicker that I'm gonna use.
I'm just trying to get you slide up. Sorry.
My slides are more for my reference than anybody else's, so.
Beautiful.
Okay, so is that the next slide?
Impressive.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Molly Wofford, and I'm the senior proposal writer for the Qualcomm Institute here on campus. If you're a longtime UCSD person, you may know us as Cal IT2. We are the UCSD division of Cal IT2, which also has a division at UC Irvine and a division at UC Riverside. And we are part of this innovation ecosystem here at UCSD. I like to think of us as sort of pre-incubator stage. We have a lot of facilities that help innovators and entrepreneurs and academics realize their ideas and their dreams. We have a nanofabrication facility, for example. We have a photonics lab. We have a prototyping lab, a immersive visualization lab, and a sonic arts lab. All of these facilities are available for people to use to realize their vision. So, and then they have me. I'm the grant writer, and we have an innovation space on the second floor where a lot of entrepreneurs take up residence for a little bit. And that's where I was introduced to SBIR proposals. I started helping those people with their grants. And I put this little cartoon here, which if you can't read it, it says I'm a fiction writer in the grant proposal genre. That's not how I typically introduce myself, but I think it's funny. And I included it here because people don't really think of it, but to be a good grant, to have a compelling grant, you do kind of have to use your imagination. You need to be able to first imagine yourself into the future. Imagine your business being successful. Imagine your product when it's fully developed. Imagine how that's going to affect, the society. How is it going to impact society? Where might your challenges be? Who are your customers going to be? And what might surprise you in the future? Like, what are there applications that you never intended your product to do, but then maybe they came about? These are the sort of things you really need to sort of imagine. And if you can imagine those things and talk about those things, then you're ready to write a really compelling proposal. And so the first step, I don't think you can see it up there, but this is step one. Step one isn't actually writing. Step one is going to be planning ahead before you start writing. You want to, number one, get all your registrations done. There are several registrations you're going to have to do. You're going to have to be in the small, that SAM, what does SAM stand for? Service something well, anyway, SAM is a registration Systems Award Management, that's what it stands for. Systems Award Management, if you're gonna get funding from the government, you're gonna have to be in that system. That's how they're gonna pay you. So you need to register for that. you need to register with the Small Business Administration. And then you're probably going to have to register with whatever agency it is that you're applying for. Go ahead and do those things before you even start writing, because they take time to process and you don't want to have to be worrying about that when you're actually submitting. Once you've done that, I recommend you do some research. There's a lot of places you can submit your proposals. There's, as Matt said, there's 11 different agencies. You can submit to more than one of them. So I would suggest that you look at what's available. You don't have to submit to just a broad agency announcement. There are specific announcements out there, and you can increase your odds of success if you can find a solicitation that's very specific to what you're actually doing. If you can find a solicitation like that, you've just upped your odds of a successful application, because your innovation is going to fit the needs of that agency. So do that research. So that's your solicitation research. You can start at grants.gov, and you can actually filter out all the filters and just look for ones that are available to small businesses. That's a good way to start to find your solicitations. Once you've found a solicitation that you're interested in, now go into that agency's, usually like NSF has, you can do an award search at nsf.gov. You can do an award search at NIH's reporter.com. Go look and see what they've already funded. Do a keyword search in there and see, that'll give you information. You'll know what the agency's looking for, and you'll also know if they've already well-funded that application area, and maybe you need to pivot and try and find a little bit of a different application area. And then next would be read all instructions. Matt touched on that. Once you find your solicitation, absolutely sit down and read that solicitation from start to finish. Highlight things, do a keyword search. Look for the word must. Highlight every area in that solicitation where it says, applicants must do this, so that you don't miss any component or any little tiny detail that could potentially get your application thrown out because you didn't include it. So read those instructions. They'll often tell you exactly what you need to put in your proposal. They'll tell you sometimes what headings to use, and then they'll give you instructions for what content needs to go in there. So that's your first easiest way to start a proposal, is to read those solicitation instructions. Now, in addition to the solicitation, every agency has their own general guidelines. They're usually like 100 pages long, and they're very, very detailed. But you'll want to refer to those as well if you have questions about what goes into a section. If something's allowed, you can refer to those sections. In the NSF is the proposal award policies. NIH and other institutions will also have their own special instructions. So when you have conflicting instructions, the solicitation's always going to take precedence. Follow the solicitation first, and then look at the other instructions. You can also go, NIH has a wonderful resource where you can look at sample applications that will help you figure out, what needs to go in where and what, format you need to use. Formatting's important. That seems like such a simple thing, but they will absolutely throw you out and not even review your application if your font size is wrong, if your margins are too, small or whatever. So make sure you follow the correct formatting. I knew somebody whose application got thrown out without review after, however many weeks he spent working on it, because he included URLs in his application, and you're not allowed, this was NIH, you're not allowed to use a link or a live URL in the research strategy. So again, make sure you've got, read your solicitation and your instructions, and you'll catch those things ahead of time. Then finally, based on the solicitation, go ahead and create an outline of your documents that you're going to need. And I will talk about those documents in just a second. So now this is actually the next step, which is you're ready to start writing. You've done your imagining. You think you know what you want to apply to. Now you need to be persuasive. Because grant writing is persuasive writing. You are pitching somebody. You are trying to tell them why they should give you money to do something. So how do you be persuasive? Well, first off, know what problem you're solving. Even though these are small business grants and they want you to succeed as a business, what they really, really want is to solve a problem that's specific to that agency. It's important to that agency. So what problem are you solving that's important to that agency? Know the problem. Then know your product inside and out. Be able to talk about your product in detail and how it's going to solve that very specific problem that you've identified. Then you need to have a plan. And you're going to need to have two plans, actually. You need to have a plan for how you're going to develop your product. And then you're going to have a plan for how your business is going to succeed. And you need to be able to talk about both those things. Then part of being persuasive is go ahead and be bold. Make bold statements and be daring. And in some cases, go ahead and pitch something that's outrageous if you think you can do it. The thing is, you just got to back it up. So if you're saying, oh, this is going to, change the gold standard for how something, is being done, then, back that up with some statistics, some preliminary evidence, a chart, the literature, back up your bold statements, but do go ahead and make those bold statements because you want to distinguish yourself. And most agencies are not looking for incremental improvement of things that already exist. They want to see big leaps and change, especially NSF. NSF loves high risk, high reward stuff. So go ahead and take a chance with NSF and propose something crazy. You don't in a phase one, I'll say this, in a phase one proposal, you don't necessarily have to have a prototype. You don't even necessarily have to have a lot of preliminary evidence for what you're doing. You do need to be able to back it up with, say, the literature. So like if you're proposing a sensor, a new type of sensor for something, if you can point to an existing sensor and prove that your concept will work similar to this, but you're just going to rejigger it and make it a new application, that's okay for a phase one. And it's also okay to fail in a phase one. You won't necessarily go on to phase two unless you can pivot. If you learn, as long as you're learning something in that phase one, you can take that knowledge and then pivot. You can still move on to phase two. And then the final thing, of course, for being persuasive is do remember your audience. Remember who's reading this proposal. Generally speaking, your reviewers are going to be 3 to 5 reviewers. The majority are going to be academic researchers, and they're going to scrutinize the heck out of your research strategy. The other researchers are going to be med tech developers, business experts, and they're going to scrutinize the heck out of your commercialization plan. So, but neither one of those are going to be experts in everything. So when you're writing for the reader, don't assume they know what you're talking about. Make sure you spell out acronyms. If you name drop, software or different institutes or whatever, do explain, briefly, what this software is for and what it does. Spell out your acronyms, and also try to make your proposal, easy to read. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. So now you've read your solicitation, you know what you're going to do. And so basically in your proposals, you've got some basic components. They will vary according to, the agency. But these 4 components are in some form are what you're going to need in your proposals. Even in a phase 1 proposal, you're still going to, the commercialization plan is a specific document in phase 2 proposals, but even in a phase 1 proposal, you're still going to have to somewhat talk about your commercialization plans, just not in detail. So your first document is your aims or your objectives. Most proposals have about 3. You don't have to have 3, but I wouldn't go with more than say 4. If you go to 5 objectives, you're probably proposing way too much. So one way to figure out what your aims and objectives are to think about what the funding level is and the duration of the project. What can you actually accomplish with $150,000 in 6 months? So don't propose something that you can't do with $150,000 in 6 months. So that's going to help you figure out what your aims and your objectives are. And then your abstract is basically going to be a summary of your whole proposal. For some agencies like NSF, your aims and your abstract are combined into a project summary. Usually the abstract gets written after everything else. That's why it's number 4. You write your research strategy, you write your proposal first, and then you go ahead and summarize it. So the two biggest parts of your proposal are the narrative, which NIH calls research strategy, and your commercialization plan. In the narrative, I wonder if that was my next slide. Yeah, in your narrative section, again, these sections may be a little bit different. This is sort of just a general breakdown of what you're going to need to include in there. You're going to have your introduction, and in that introduction, you're going to talk about the significance of what your product is, the problem that you're solving, and you're going to give a very brief description of your solution to that problem. This is going to be like your first page and a half or so of your proposal. This is your section here to do your elevator pitch. Okay, so if you have an elevator pitch, it's going to go here in the first section. This is where you can be a little bit passionate, be a little bit, use those bold statements about, changing, the gold standard for whatever. Put that in the beginning. Then you're going to go into a little bit more detail. You're going to need to describe your innovation. You're going to need to, this is where you go into a little more technical detail about what your product is. If you have preliminary studies or preliminary evidence, you're going to describe it there. And then your approach and your research plan is, like I said, what the academics are going to really scrutinize. That's your methods. This is where you have to describe what you're actually doing in this project, and it needs to be detailed. So what if you're a brand new startup, you're only 2 people, and part of what you're doing is engineering, and you're not an engineer? How do you write this detailed research plan about how you're going to build this product? And the answer is you probably don't. You ask your engineer to do it. If you're going to contract out parts of your proposal or part of your project to an engineer or to a medical person, because you don't have that expertise, ask those people to write these parts of the proposal for you, and ask them to be detailed, because this is where you're going to convince the reviewers that you can do what you say you're going to do. And so it can't be in broad terms. It needs to be, very specific. And then you always pretty much have a timeline. For the timeline, I suggest that the timeline not just be for the project, it be for the whole commercialization. Because like in a phase 1 proposal, obviously at the end of that project, you're not going to be ready for commercialization, but you might want to have a timeline that goes, beyond the project period, just to show them that you're thinking ahead, that you do have that long-term plan, that you're not just trying to get money right now and you haven't thought beyond that one proposal. So that's the narrative. Then the next big document is the commercialization plan. Again, this is generally a phase 2 document, but even in phase 1, you're going to touch on these things. And this is where where your reader is going to be the business experts and stuff. So again, you're going to describe your innovation again. And that's going to be repetitive. And you're probably going to go, my proposal sounds really repetitive. It's okay. It's okay if your proposal's repetitive. You can try saying it in a different way, but it's good, actually, repetitiveness, because most reviewers, they're not going to read your proposal word for word all the way through. They're going to scan sections and whatever. So when you repeat your main core message of, you know, how great your product is, it's good because they might miss it the first time you said it. So say it again and again and again. So these are the things that you really need to know and be able to talk about. So the product is, you know, the innovation, that's your product, and the impact that it's going to have. How is your product going to solve this problem that you described? You also need to be able to talk about your company and your project team. Again, if your company is small and it's just you, then talk about your advisors, talk about your consultants, talk about you know, how you're going to, this is where you're convincing them that you're going to be able to accomplish whatever it is you're going to accomplish, and you need to show them that you have the experts. Even if you're not the expert, then you have connections that are experts. And so you will be able to do what you say you're going to do. Market, customers, and competition. You need to know that. You need to do some do some basic market research. I think that's a big weakness I see a lot in proposals, is they don't spend enough time. And quite often you may find that the people you thought were your customers are not your customers. I knew somebody who was developing, worked on a proposal with them, and we got a phase 1 for a sensor that was biosensor for detecting alcohol. They were going to change the way alcoholism was treated. It was a great proposal. But when he got to phase 2, he found out, after doing some market research, alcoholics will never, ever, ever, ever use this product. They just won't. So he pivoted, and they made it about opioid detection instead. Or they also found a more niche market. So the product was now no longer, the customer was now no longer alcoholics. If they were going to do alcohol, the product was now professionals who had lost their license because of alcohol problem and needed to stay sober in order to keep their license. You know, that's a very tiny niche market, but that's okay. You can have a small market. It does not have to be $1 billion market. You just have to be able to convince the reviewers that a market exists. And again, be ready to pivot if you find out, yeah, that the customers that you thought you were going to sell to aren't your customers at all. You'll need to have a basic business model. In phase 1, all of this can be sort of broad, but when you get to phase 2, it's going to need to be pretty specific. You're going to need to know not only who your customers are, but how are you going to reach them? What are you going to sell your product for? You know, how much revenue do you think you can make in year 1, year 2? When are you going to start, breaking even? When are you going to start making a profit? Those are sorts of things that you need to sort of pencil out and be able to show. And your marketing strategy is not as important, but they do want to know that you've thought about it. You need to be able to talk about that. And I will say, if you're developing any kind of medical device, absolutely talk about your FDA approval plans, because reviewers will want to see that. They will want to know if you know how you're going to get FDA approval if it's required. So this was step 3, which is revise and revise and revise. So once you've done a first draft, go back and revise and read it in your proposal in a critical manner. And these are things that will help your reader. When I said earlier that you want to keep your reader in mind, you want to stay focused and on point. A lot of times people start to drift and make multiple points in a paragraph, and you don't want to do that. You want to just make one point in one paragraph and stay on point. That helps your reader, and that's where sometimes the repetitiveness comes in. I find that it's really good sometimes to always sum up your paragraphs with the point that you were trying to make, so that the reviewer doesn't have to wonder what the point was. You just go ahead and tell them. Sum it up. Format for clarity. Use headings. in the solicitation, a lot of times they'll tell you what headings to use, but go ahead and use subheadings and be descriptive in those subheadings, because again, reviewers will love a proposal that they can scan and just quickly pick out the important parts and only have to read those important parts. Be consistent. When I say be consistent, I mean just, again, in the way you use your punctuation and your capitalization and your, figure legends and styling and stuff like that, because reviewers do comment on grantmanship, if things appear sloppy. And then if you're able to, get outside opinions. Always have somebody else read your proposal and give you, because it's always helpful to have that outside perspective, especially when you've been working on something for so long that you can't even see straight anymore. So, it's good to have somebody else tell you, because they can point out those parts that didn't make sense, and then you can add that clarity for them. And then finally, submit early. You can't see it up there, but the final step is to submit early. Don't wait for the deadline. Submit a few days early, and there's a couple of reasons to do that. I actually had a conversation once with a reviewer who was head of a review committee for many, many years. And he told me that statistically, the proposals that submitted early got funded at a higher rate than the proposals that came in at the very last minute. Don't know why that is. I would suspect that's because proposals that get submitted early were the ones that followed step one and planned ahead and wrote really thorough and well thought out proposals. But who knows? Maybe you get in early and you get read early and you get a higher chance of success. I don't know. But the biggest reason to submit early is you will almost certainly run into problems that need to be fixed. Error messages, technical difficulties. And I can't tell you how many times I know of PIs who have missed their deadline because when they hit that submit button, they got back error messages that they could not fix in time to make the deadline. So submit early so that in case there's technical problems that you're going to need to call a help desk to figure out, or maybe you get an error message that says, oops, you have a clinical trial, so you need all these human subject documents and you didn't prepare those human subject documents, so now you got to go and prepare these documents real quick. You have to have time to make those mistakes. And then hurry up and wait. You'll probably have to wait 6 months at least to hear back, and so you can get started on your next proposal in the meantime. The end.
Thank you. Thank you. As we continue this journey on this continuum and learning about grants, so Molly gave you a lot of very good insights. I mean, this is probably one of the most critical element of this info session today is how to apply for grants. And obviously, Molly could also be there to answer any questions you may have. But this is a critical step. And as I mentioned before, take advantage of the writing workshop that the Brink Center offers, because that could also give you additional tips, especially if it's the first time you're applying for an SBIR. So now we're going to switch gear, and now we're going to have Ryan. Sorry.
Hello.
Sorry,
Hey,
yep. Sorry,
can you
sorry.
hear me? Am I coming in loud and clear?
We can hear you. Yeah, Kit,
Okay.
you want to share your screen if you don't mind?
Perfect. Okay. All right. Can you see?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I can't see you guys, but that's okay. First of all, really excited to be here. Thank you to everybody at UCSD and the Brink, Stephen, Amy, and the whole team there. Always appreciate getting the opportunity to come and teach entrepreneurs about some of the key issues around formation and IP, especially as it relates to SBIR grants. And shout out to my colleague, Jason Sterling, who will be doing a presentation on equity financing, and we'll probably go into a little bit more detail than I'll get an opportunity to here on formation and some tax considerations as well on the different entity structures. If you have an opportunity to check that out, I highly recommend it. Since we only have about like 15 minutes or so here, I'll be pretty high level, and I'm going to try to touch on the things that I think are the most material for entrepreneurs as they're choosing their entity type and jurisdiction and considering IP issues. But before I go into that, I'll give you a little brief introduction for myself. My name is Kit Ryan, and I'm a M&A corporate and venture capital associate at Pillsbury, which is a global law firm that covers, I think 20 offices globally and lots of other interesting metrics, but basically a full service law firm. I help entrepreneurs like everybody around here raise money and buy and sell businesses. So if you're interested in learning more about that or just having a conversation with me generally, feel free to reach out. All right, now enough about that. Let's dive in. So what we're going to cover today is the different types of entities that you have the opportunity to form, which ones are considered the best from a tax perspective, liability perspective, and other considerations that you should think about, and different jurisdictions that, really it comes down to between California and Delaware, and which we see the most often utilized. And 3 key questions you should be asking yourself when forming a business are: should you care about the legal structure and jurisdiction of formation when starting your business? I'll preview the answer, and it is yes, and hopefully everybody here will agree with me by the end of the presentation. The next question is that we'll be covering is what are the most common types of corporate entities to choose from, and then we'll also talk through the pros and cons of choosing different entity types and jurisdictions. The key things, the key important aspects of choosing the correct entity and jurisdiction is that it will streamline your management for your company. It will create limitation of liability for you personally and your other founders. You'll be able to obtain funding, whether that's through SBIR, non-dilutive funding, or through an equity-based round or dilutive funding. And you will be able to incentivize management and be tax efficient. And we'll hopefully have time to talk through all of those. There are quite a few different types of entities, and they're really broken down into, based on, or their differences really come down to whether there's liability protection or double taxation or flow-through taxation. For the first 3, sole proprietorship, limited partnership, general partnership, these are all flow-through taxation entities, which essentially means that the income or loss that's generated at the partnership or sole prop level flows through down to your personal Schedule C on your tax return. So that means you pay 1 level of taxation as opposed to 2, which we'll talk about with the C corporation, and you'll pay, I think it's ordinary income tax rates on the income that's generated from those entities. The downside that a lot of entrepreneurs don't seem to grasp or appreciate when they initially form businesses is that that income flows through to your personal tax return regardless of the distributions that you receive from the entity. So a quick example, let's say you form a general partnership, or let's use a sole prop for an easier example. You own 100% of the business. In year 1, you have $100,000 of taxable net income. On your personal tax return, regardless if you were paid anything, let's say you worked the entire year, didn't receive any distributions or take any money out of the business, you will still see $100,000 show up in your aggregate gross income, increasing the total amount of tax that you personally have to pay, even though you didn't walk away with any actual cash in pocket. And that's a key consideration, and just to preview kind of the rationale for choosing entities that we'll land on later, but that's a key reason why BCs, private equity companies, or firms don't or prefer to invest in C corporations as opposed to limited liability companies or partnerships because of that flow through issue. That's not to say that there are mechanisms or ways to get around that. It's just the preference. It's easier generally to work with a C corporation than it is a LLC, a flow through LLC, or a general partnership. For the sole prop and the general partnership, there is no liability protection for any of the owners. For the limited partnership, there will be protection only for the limited partner. It's pretty rare to see entrepreneurs, at least coming out of UCSD or the Brink, or that we typically advise at Pillsbury, to utilize like sole prop, limited partnership, or a general partnership. You're much more likely to see entrepreneurs pushing for an S corporation or an LLC, or even better yet, a C corporation. The benefit of the LLC is that you get limited liability, just like you do with the limited partnership. You can elect either flow through taxation, like we just talked about, or to be taxed as a C corporation. Being taxed as a C corporation just essentially means there's double taxation. Using the example before, let's say there's $100,000 at your LLC level that was generated last year, but you elected to be taxed as a C corporation. Nothing is going to show up on your personal tax return. There will be tax paid at the C corp level based off the corporate tax rate, which I think the maximum is 21%. And then if there is a distribution to you, though, there's an additional tax that's paid, basically a dividend tax to you, because it's treated as a dividend from a tax perspective. And so there's a little bit of give and take, because generally flow through taxation is better for the owner of the entity. And so entrepreneurs almost inevitably elect to use a LLC if they didn't receive legal advice when they were forming their business. If that sounds like you, don't be concerned, because you can pretty easily convert from an LLC to a C corporation. And actually, there's a benefit to doing that because it impacts something called qualified small business stock, which I'll get into later on. But that's kind of a high level of the differences from a tax perspective and limitation of liability for the different entity types. I'll skip through the B Corp and the public benefit corporation just because for time considerations. When you're forming a C Corp, well, I'll start with the LLC and then I'll talk through this slide for the C Corp. When you're forming an LLC, it's pretty easy. You really just need to file one document, or sometimes you don't even need to file a document. You can just go on, if you use California's Secretary of State, you can go on their website and do everything online. It's very streamlined. It's very quick and easy. If you're going to do something like that yourself, I highly recommend, if you have other founders that are coming in, to enter into an operating agreement just to make sure that everything is papered, and also to document the equity grants to yourself and to the other members of the LLC. If you're forming a C corporation, there's kind of a laundry list of documents that you need, but they're all pretty streamlined. Pillsbury Propel, which is a website that Pillsbury runs, includes draft documents that are standardized that you can take a look at. You can also use different websites to form your entity that can sometimes work out. Other times, when people input incorrect information, we have to go back after the fact and clean it up, which can add more legal costs later on. And I'll just also plug the entrepreneurship clinic at the University of San Diego, so USD. Students at the law school offer or work with, I think Mintz is the big law firm that runs that program. They do everything for free. They're a little slow sometimes. It can take a little while to form your business, but they do a good job. I highly recommend using them, or at least considering that as an option if funds are tight. So they'll go through the process. They'll document the certificate of incorporation, action of incorporator, the board consent, bylaws, and all the founder stock purchase agreements. for you, and they'll probably talk through the key aspects of each and what are material. But just to preview that for you, the main thing here is the founder stock purchase agreements, making sure that everyone is subject to vesting, including transfer restrictions, because you don't want somebody who you just brought in to start your company, you gave them 20% of your business, you're supposed to work on this for the next 5 to 10 years, but you didn't include a vesting requirement, and so immediately you give away 20% of your company and for nothing. And they can just walk away and keep that. Now, there's ways to mitigate that, but the easiest way to mitigate that is to require them or to require vesting. Similarly, you don't want them to just be transferring it or selling the shares elsewhere to third parties, because it's typically a material portion of the cap table, and you want to monitor and restrict your cap table as much as possible, especially early on. And you want your cap table to look good, managed when you go into discussions with investors when you're raising funds. The next thing to consider with your founder SPA is a repurchase right for the company. You can either have an automatic repurchase right, or you have to send them notice. My preference is an automatic repurchase right. This just allows the company, if you founded a business with your friend, they decide to go to law school and become an attorney instead. And instead of having the company, or instead of having to actually pay them directly in order to automatically repurchase it, it just automatically happens in the background when they terminate their service with the company. You still have to send them a check for the same purchase price that they had for their founder SPA, but it should be de minimis. And that helps tie things out later on. And it's saved companies that I've worked for on their Series A financing or beyond. So I highly recommend that. Same concept too for acceleration, which is the right to accelerate the vesting on a change of control. That can either be a single trigger or double trigger. Single trigger just means if you sell your business, that will accelerate and you can all of the vesting. Double trigger means that after the sale of the company, the individual who holds the shares that are subject to vesting has to be fired or no longer is allowed to work with the company, and that's when it will actually accelerate at that moment. And we can move on to the next slide here. This slide really just gives you different things to think about between the LLC and the C corporation, which are the kind of winners of the most popular entity types that we typically see. For ease of formation, the LLC tends to be better or easier to form, although a C corporation is fairly easy as well. For management and control, I would give this to the C corporation, although the LLC can operate from a management perspective similar to a C corporation. But what puts the C corporation over the line is that it's easier to create an equity incentive plan. And you should be very familiar with what an equity incentive plan is when you form a business, because that's how you'll be paying people for the work that they'll be doing, at least in the early years. And so LLCs, it's difficult, it's costly from a legal perspective to actually implement an option plan that is done correctly. The other, since it's top of mind, the other thing to note is if you're an owner of an LLC, you can't be an employee of that LLC. That's not true for a C corporation, and so it provides a little bit more flexibility from that perspective. So you can still have stock in a company, and you can be an employee of the same. Both provide limited liability, so they're pretty even from that perspective. Investors' opinion. The investors, like I said or previewed earlier, prefer the C corporation, but I have seen investors also invest in LLCs. It's probably 90% to 10%. So just consider that. And then tax considerations, which we discussed earlier. When you're thinking about jurisdiction, you need to think about where you live, where your customers live, where your investors live, and really it's just going to end up being either California or Delaware. Now, there's a requirement to register in every state where you're deemed to do business in that state, each state has different requirements. Some entrepreneurs choose not to do the analysis on whether they should register in any particular state because it can be costly. I have seen this bite the people in the butt when it comes to selling their business. They have $80,000, $100,000 of contingent liabilities or liabilities that PwC or insert name of accounting firm has determined are on the books because they failed to do that analysis up front and they didn't register in those businesses. So it's something you should consider. Each state has different requirements, and so it's a case-by-case basis. It can be costly to do a real analysis on that, but 99%, maybe that's a little generous, 90% of the states will base it on if a majority of the members of the board are in a particular state, if you've registered in that state. So if you file to become a Delaware C Corp or a California C Corp, that automatically means that you're registered to do business there. If there's a certain amount of customers or the revenue that you've generated for the business is located or based in that state, those are other metrics, but each state has their own. So consider looking into that if you do business in a lot of different states, or if you have a majority in like Ohio or Idaho or something like that, just something to consider. Now, this has a lot of words on it, but this basically outlines the different considerations for SBIR with respect to the entity type. Now, you can have any of the entity types that we outlined before. So whether that's a sole prop, a general partnership, limited partnership, C Corp, LLC, but they have to be a for-profit US-based entity. So they can't be a foreign company, and they have to have fewer than 500 employees. So nonprofits, for example, or unincorporated options won't qualify. The other requirement to be aware of is that at least 50% of the outstanding equity of the company from a voting perspective needs to be held by US citizens directly or indirectly. And by indirectly, that means that if you have, let's say that the entity that you want to get an SBIR grant for is a subsidiary of a parent company, they will look through the parent company and look to the owners of that entity to determine whether it's 50% of the control of the entity that's getting the grant is held by US individuals. So consider that. I've seen that come up several times, and there are workarounds to that people attempt, but it's important to understand that that's a material requirement. The next is about ownership of IP. It's important that the company that is getting the grant actually owns the IP that's associated that you're getting that you're qualifying for the SBIR grant. Excuse me. This means that you need at the onset when you form your business, you should enter into what's called a PIIA, a proprietary information and inventions assignment agreement. That basically assigns all of your individual rights to anything that you develop in your capacity as an employee or an owner of your company to the actual entity. So it clarifies that the company you started actually owns all the IP, and it's not you that owns it individually. And you should have every single one of your employees and contractors sign the exact same PIIA. And this is very material. It comes up all of the time in practice, and it's also important for the SBIR grant. Investors will care about this, and so it's better to get ahead of it now and rather than address it later on. The last thing I will note here on this slide is documentation. It's important to get the proper formation documents actually drafted and executed and done everything correctly ahead of time. We outlined, or a prior slide listed all of the documents that you need to form your business. It didn't include the PIIA, which I should probably update for that, but it's not technically a required document. But I would put it in the realm of a necessity. That's how important it is. Next, we're going to turn to the IP considerations for SBIR. We kind of previewed this at the beginning, or we already talked about that you need to centralize your ownership of your IP at the corporation or LLC level. So assign all the IP to the entity in connection with the formation, or at least before you do the apply for the grant. This includes founder IP assignment agreements. The other thing to note here is if you haven't already filed for a provisional or actual patent for your proprietary technology, consider doing that before applying for the grant. The issue is that when you go through the application process, you typically we just talked about this. You outline all of the proprietary technology that help you get the eligibility for the grant. The downside is if you put your proprietary technology or the background of that proprietary technology into the public domain, then you're no longer allowed to patent that. Now, there's a lot of, I'll caveat that with there's a lot of ways to get around that, but it's just a foot fault that could happen. And that's why it's key to consider what you're actually putting in the application and not to disclose anything that is material to your right to patent in the future that you haven't already attempted to patent through a provisional or actual application. Once you apply for that provisional or patent application, it protects you, it locks you in, and so you can go talk about everything that you put into your application without endangering your ability to patent it later on. The next thing here for employment and NDA agreements, it's just important to get everyone who touches your IP to assign their rights to that IP to the company, and also to enter into NDA agreements as well to protect you from them talking about things that are material to your proprietary technology. I only have a few minutes here left, and so one really important aspect of the C corporation that I want everyone to understand, and it does have to do with tax, so I'm sorry to circle back to that, but it's really material, so I think it's important. It's called qualified small business stock. Only C corporations are eligible for qualified small business stock. Qualified small business stocks says that if you sell that stock after holding it for 5 years, and there's a few other eligibility requirements that I'll talk to in the next slide, but if you sell it after 5 years, you get up to $10 million of tax-free gain from at least a federal perspective. Different states have different rules. Unfortunately, California doesn't follow the federal rules, so you'll still pay state tax on it, but at least you'll save $10 million worth of taxation, up to $10 million of taxation on your QSBS. LLCs and S Corps, they're not eligible, although LLCs, if you check the box as a C corporation, I believe they are eligible. But the benefit of starting off as an LLC is you can convert to a C corporation, and at that point, it will generate into qualified small business stock if you still meet the metrics. This can be a tax strategy for those who have some value in the LLC that they've already formed, maybe a year or two prior to the conversion. Let's skip through this slide. I want to just talk about the criteria for the QSBS. So the criteria is just simply the gross assets of the business can't exceed $50 million, and 80% of the assets must be used in an active business. You also have to hold the stock for at least 5 years. One thing to consider later down the line is if you sell your business through a merger or through an asset sale, you won't get the benefit of QSBS. If you sell through a stock acquisition, then you do. And so that's an important thing to understand if you're trying to achieve this later down the line. The next few slides talk about the different jurisdictions and whether do you do Delaware or California. This really comes down to whether you're going to try and get funding from institutional or venture capitalists. The preference is Delaware. There's lots of different reasons for this, but the main and most important reason from your perspective should just be the investors are requiring it or it's their preference, and you want to make everything as easy as possible for them to say, yes, I will fund you, and where should I send the check? And I think with that, I will close it off. All right.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you for your time. So as you could imagine, right, obviously the whole legal aspect is really important. So we have a ton of great attorneys here. So if you ever need help, you could always come to us. We have attorneys that could come and help you. We also have an amazing workshop tomorrow. I just pointed out because we talk about the subject of startup formation and investment. It's happening tomorrow from 4:30 to 5:30. It's in person. Unfortunately, it's not online. You're welcome to come later and use the QR code to register, but it will be the same firm, someone else, and they'll go through the whole mechanics of investments and corporate and what does it mean for the structure of your company. So now we'll get the next speaker. People to connect. So we have Vicky Meadow. So in this process of, talk about SBIR, so you've learned about all the facets. Now you probably want to hear from someone who's gone through the process. So that's what Vicky will do today. And she'll share her own experience and maybe give you some tips on how you could do it yourself. So I'll turn it to you. And if you could use the mic. Let me try to do it. I don't use Firefox that much.
Okay. I'll just give it a shot. Okay. Is that good?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So my name is Vicky, and the science world knows me as Vicky Nienaber, but the education world knows me as Vicky Meadows. And my friends ask me how many names I have. But yeah, so I'm a founder. I wrote all my own SBIR grants. I had, a lot of the ideas working with my team. I come from the biotech space. I worked in biotech for 30 years. I had a biotech company for many years. And I've now transitioned to that part of my life is all consulting, primarily to university physician scientists on early stage drug discovery, and transitioned my business side to science education, really kind of as an early retirement to give back to the community. So I primarily received grants from the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation. Is there anybody in here that's interested in an institute other than those two? Where are you going to apply? Oh, yes, so NIH, yeah. So, okay. Yeah, that's like its own beast. I've only just dipped my toe into that. And for that, I did actually work with a consultant because she knew all the program managers. She knew how to get me in front of the right people. And we got a almost fundable score. So we're deciding if we want to resubmit, but I've only done one DOD. I was going to primarily talk about NIH and NSF. And I thought what might be useful, rather than me giving you a lot of theory, is say, what would I do if I was going to apply for an NIH grant? We have some time. September 5th is the next deadline, which is nice because there's a lot of moving parts, as you might have heard on the news, about what's going on at NIH and NSF. I'll say I think a lot of it is getting resolved. My grant funds were actually frozen for a while, as maybe some of yours were, which was really fun. But NSF was able to get that resolved rather quickly. So let's see. So I was going to try and show you some of the websites and how to navigate them, and also what my general strategy is when I'm going to apply I'll be brave and share the window. So I didn't get a chance, unfortunately, to bring everything up in advance. Let me see, I'm going to move this out of the way. Okay, so, oh, wow, it wants to restart my computer right now. Remind me tomorrow. Tomorrow. Okay, can all rest easy. My restart scheduled for tomorrow. So just some general comments, especially in NIH, you're fortunate you can still talk to the program manager and you have lots of time. The program manager is your friend. I would be thinking about my specific aims, get those written, think about the type of project you want to do, and establish contact with the program manager. And I'll show you how to find that in a moment. NSF has changed their process. Now you have to do a project pitch. And I checked this morning, and if you try to click on the link where it listed all the program managers, it just keeps sending you to email, SBIR at, I think it's SBIR@nsf.gov or something. So you don't have access to the program managers there right away. You have to submit the pitch. What NSF is really good about is they have a lot of, usually it's posted on YouTube, but they'll have a lot of office hours. So we'll find that website as well. So check the office hours, log in. You can ask any question you want. And they usually post those on YouTube. And with NSF, I would say you must watch those and follow what they tell you. They tell you exactly what to do. So yeah, I'm assuming you can see my, so we can look up NIH, SBIR, which I think now they've changed it to the seed fund. NSF used to started calling it the seed fund. Now they call it a seed fund because of course it's non-dilutive funding. So the question is, should you apply for an SBIR? Absolutely, yes. Can they be difficult to get, especially for first-time submissions? Absolutely. Should you keep submitting? Yes. That's what I did. My first grant, I worked, for big pharma and medium-sized biotech my whole career. My first grant was a few pages long because that's what management wanted to see. And they sent it back to me and said, this grant's not long. They literally said, this grant isn't long enough. And that's been back when the grants had to be 15 pages. So, you kind of learn by trial and error. But once you learn and get your own style, then you can start getting your success rate up. Of course, now there are all these great resources, like at the Brink, where you can maybe bypass some of the mistakes I made. But if you go to the website and we see open funding opportunities, the first thing I wanted to show you is there's the general omnibus solicitation, and then there's specific opportunities for the different institutes, like aging, infectious disease, whatever. Especially now, you might want to consider just applying for the omnibus because a lot of things that are going on, grants are no longer being reviewed at the institute, they're being reviewed outside. So I think you're better off just send to the omnibus. That's just what I would do. It's up to you what you want to do. So if we click on the omnibus, I think they're down here. The other thing that I logged on this morning and looked, the other thing that I noticed is different is they're separating out clinical trial from non-clinical trial. And probably no one in here is clinical trial. So you are. So it affects you. So you want to definitely look at the clinical trial because not all institutes are being funded. And I've heard that those at the highest level of the government don't want to fund like cancer clinical trials and things. So there might be some more changes. So just make sure before you submit, and that's where your program manager is also a huge help. So if you click on, so let's pick the one. And as you saw, the success rate for SBIR is significantly higher than STTR. So unless you have a good reason, like you're working closely with a university professor who wants 50% of the money for phase 1, you really should try and submit the SBIR, much higher success rate. So let's look at, oh, that's clinical trial, not allowed. Not allowed. SBIR. So as Molly said, as repetitive and irrelevant as this document seems, you must read every word. There's a lot of very important information in there. And also, if we have time, we can go to this link. But just if you just put into Google NIH new funding priorities or whatever, you'll see the type of verbiage you don't want to include in your grant, which is basically the DEI and all of the things we've been hearing about on the news. But it's clearly written out on the NIH website. And again, it's something you can run by your program manager. One thing to know is our program managers are government employees. They are not allowed to make any comment on public policy, their opinions. All they can do is give you the facts. So you have to, be careful in how you ask your questions. I'll just leave that at that. So you see most of the institutes are still listed, which is really great. I did talk to some friends. I'm part of a women's, we're having one this Friday, a women founder happy hour group. And it seems like all the grants are getting reviewed now, except for anything in infectious disease, which we probably can guess why, and anything to do with like addiction or mental health. So if you're working in those areas, you probably want to check. I'll show you, there's this website, Center for Scientific Review. Scientific Review. And you can look at study sections. So it's my understanding that now all grants are going to be sent to study sections, but not all study sections are meeting. Some are meeting and some aren't. So as you submit your grant, let's see, there's a SBIR. Yeah, SBIR study sections. So, say I'm going to work on biobehavioral processes. So I'm going to click on this study section. And so it looks like, I don't know if there's any scheduled. I will point out another thing is as you figure out what study section you think you're going to go to, I always go here and look at the last list of reviewers. And what's helpful with this is even though this is a small business grant, at least in the past, it wasn't necessarily being reviewed by people that work in small business. There may be a large number of academic reviewers. That means you need to know, you should know the literature anyways, but you need to know the literature and reference the literature, because the only way they know you know the literature is if you reference the literature. So yes, for example, the chair of the study section is a professor. There's another professor, department chair, professor. There's a CEO. But you see, this is largely reviewed by academic researchers. And so they're going to want to see scientific rigor. And if it's not in there, they'll assume you don't know it and it'll come back. And you can always resubmit, which I would do. That's important. The other thing I want to point out, aside from reading everything, including this horrible 100 and something page document that Molly referred to, this is nice. Now they list all the registrations here. That wasn't the case when I applied, and I missed one of them that was on page like 50 of the 100-page document that somehow I missed. So Read the document. It's painful, but you have to read it because there's some important information in there, and you don't want to miss it like I did. And I couldn't submit until the next round because I didn't submit early. Because it takes up to 2 weeks to get some of these registrations. Yeah, this how to apply application guide. You want to read that. But as Molly said, what's written in the actual request for application, it overrides the application guide. But they do have a specific application guide now for SBIR, so that's nice. Before it was just a general one, so it was very confusing. Keep an eye on the budget. I just checked it. It looks like you can still ask for 40% indirect, but there's been talk of changing that. So if you're applying now, you're just going to have to be diligent before you send it in to make sure you're in line with the latest policies, because the policies are changing monthly. The other thing I really want to show is this. This is the best information they give you, and NSF does the same thing. Review information, scored review criteria. So imagine you're a reviewer with a stack of all of these grants, and you're given a piece of paper you have to fill out. And the piece of paper has these questions on it, or some version of this question. So let's just see. Does the project or proposed product address an important problem? You know, critical barrier, unmet need, whatever. You can write it and let the reviewer come to that conclusion on their own, or you can put a sentence in your proposal, this is perfectly legal, that says, this project addresses this important problem for this reason. And I put every review criteria, I have a sentence in my proposal in bold that says the exact words that I think their question is going to be. And that way, when they're skimming your proposal, they see the bold, oh, this is the significance. Oh, this is the, you know, all of the different criteria. And then under that, you can put all the supporting information. So this again was something I learned. You know, I thought I was kind of cheating by doing that, or it was obvious, but it's not obvious. The reviewer may not even really know that much about what your particular technology is. And I've had program managers say to me over and over, when I say, why did I get this low score? They said, you didn't spell it out for the reviewers. So, you know, this is a common issue. So, and it's a gift that they give you this. So I always have this open in another window while I'm writing my proposal. If you're really organized and do what Molly said and write your proposal early, which I don't always do, I've been advised by program managers to give this to a friend that doesn't know your technology very well and give them the review criteria and say, can you find the answers to these questions in my proposal? Because again, it's very difficult if it's your idea and your baby and you've been thinking about it for years, you may not think of the obvious things to write in, you know, that the reviewer needs to see. So, you know, Molly talked about a lot of this. Investigators, this will come in with the CVs. Again, make sure when you look at the CVs, you've shown that you meet these criteria, because they're going to look and make it easy for them to find. I had a grant, I submitted my first education grant to NIH. It was not scored. Why? Because I didn't have 2 people on my team that happened to be of the skill set that the 2 of the reviewers were, and they said, you don't have these people on your team, and so they didn't even score it. So all of this is important. Innovation, that will be in your proposal. Approach, Molly talked about that. Always have things divided, as she said, into specific aims. And you want to have a Gantt chart timeline that shows, I'm going to do aim 1 here. I'm going to do aim 2 here. I'm going to do aim 3 here. Very, very simple, but it just gives the reviewers something, and it shows you're organized. And it's required, at least for NSF, it's required for phase 2. And then environment, this will be about a little bit about your team, but you also have a section where you can put in information about, you know, what equipment you have or what you have access to or whatever. I will say again, in looking at that long, painful document, one of the first things that you should do, in my opinion, is look at all of the paperwork you have to submit. There are documents you have to submit that sometimes are only one sentence. And when I submitted my new NIH grant, I did not check that document. And guess what? There were like 15 new documents I had to submit that I was scrambling, trying to get written. And it's simple things. Where are you going to put your data? Now you have to document that, you know, everyone on your team has to sign something saying that they're not working with people, you know, in China, Iran, and different, you know, different places. So they just keep adding to this. And while the biggest intellectual input is your actual proposal, don't underestimate how much time it's going to take to do all of this other stuff. So in some ways, you may want to just get that out of the way first. That's what I did for my last grant after I learned my lesson with the NIH grant. So I'm going to do all that paperwork first. And then the last thing I want to show is at the bottom. Again, you're going to read all of this, but in here it has, oh, the other thing I was going to say is, don't be afraid to call these help numbers, because I've had cases where the online documentation was so out of date. If I had tried to figure it out myself for ERA Commons or grants.gov or trying to submit, the minute I hit a problem, I'm on the phone. And they're there during work hours for us, you know, here on the West Coast, and they're very helpful. And you get to talk to at least, I don't know, with the new changes, but before you got to talk to a person and they would walk you through. So, you know, these are all just practical. And then somewhere in here, oh yeah, agency institute contacts. This is where you can find your program manager. So, you know, whichever, if you have a cancer project, you can, and you want to contact the scientific contact, not the grants contact or the review contact. And as I said, I would sketch out my specific aims and send them to them early. The NSF grant that I got that transitioned into phase 2, that was before they had the project pitch. I went back and forth with my program manager like 5 times. The big difference between NSF and, well, there's several big differences. One is NSF, and Molly touched on this, or somebody did. Innovation is key. That's what most of the project pitches for people I know get sent back because it's considered not innovative. And I think Molly mentioned this. NIH is more, in my opinion, like the way I look at it, kind of more traditional, more academic driven. You know, you have, I think you almost have to have preliminary data or be collaborating with someone who has preliminary data. And it needs to be innovative, but maybe not so much the swing for the fences. Whereas NSF, it has to be not, it cannot be incremental, as you said. It has to be innovative. And I would say I saw a lot of the projects they funded, and I didn't find them particularly innovative. So you have to write it so it's innovative. And when I submitted that grant, I went back and forth several times with my program manager, and he said, this isn't innovative, this isn't innovative. And I'd say, what about this? And eventually I got to something that got funded. And I got a phase 2. I know we're probably like, we're already so over on time. I did want to say, Another thing to think about, and this may seem inconsequential, is your title. It's like YouTube. You want them to click on it and think it's cool. And I had a friend, a colleague, and he said, oh, I got a grant on the first try, which is very unusual. And usually you have to resubmit. And he said, I'm convinced it's because I came up with a catchy name and title for my technology. So I tried an experiment. And so my next NIH grant, I came up with some catchy, some catchy name, you know, and it got funded on the first try. So, you know, I think title is important. And think about that's the first thing they're going to see. And you want to raise some curiosity. And then abstract is the next thing, and then specific aims. Or in the case of NSF, you write like that executive summary. Is anybody here submitting to NSF? Yeah, so the big difference between NIH and NSF, and he's gonna cut me off because I've only had 15 minutes. But I'm just gonna say NSF, NIH, the program managers, while they can give you a lot of guidance at the beginning, they have no say in whether or not you get funded. At least that's the way it used to be. It's all based on your score. And now the administrative review, I think they're going to go through and make sure it adheres to all those new policies. NSF, the program manager decides. You could have a fundable score and the NSF program manager could think, no, and it's unusual, but he doesn't have to fund it. But at the same time, you have the opportunity to address reviewer comments if the program manager is on your side. So just know, once you get through that project pitch, if you have the opportunity to start building a relationship with the program manager, it's highly advised. So I'll leave it with that. I'm only going to say two more things. I'm not going to be able to show you NIH Reporter, but you want to look up NIH Reporter and look for grants that were funded in your space. And that way you can see what's been funded and what review.
Okay. Okay, great. So thank you, Vicky. So we're continuing this final leg of the process. So you've gone through every single phases. I'm going to introduce one more speaker. Caroline, are you online? Yeah, I could see you.
Hi, Anna.
Hello. Sorry, we have issue with the camera, so you can't see. We have a lot of people here, but I'll let
Awesome. Hello.
you share your screen. And while you do that, Caroline works for a company called OmniSync, which is actually a venture that was started here at UC San Diego, that offers all kinds of resources. And I think, Caroline, you'll talk about the turbo innovation, but also the tool to look for SBIRs on the platform. So I'll turn it to Caroline in a second. One more thing about customer discovery. It's such an important thing. So take advantage of the Brink Center as we partner with them. But the campus also has an NSF I-Corps program that you could take as well, is also available to all of you. So I'm happy to share that later on. But I'll turn it to Caroline. If you could share your screen, or what would you prefer? I mean, are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, I can share my screen. I'll share a little bit about who we are, and then I'll share my screen and keep it quick. But some people might have heard of us. I think we have a good name in the San Diego community. Most people know us by Turbo SBIR, Turbo SBIR, basically like TurboTax for finding and applying for SBIR funding. And Jacques is right. Our founders actually met on UCSD's campus, and then partnered with the Brink. And what we basically built was the first artificial intelligence to be applied to helping find and apply for grants like SBIRs. So we were the pioneers in the space, and we launched our first iteration about 5 years ago, long before these ChatGPTs, et cetera, came around. And it took off. Our founders basically were just like you know, they had an innovation they wanted to take to market, and they were like, this is a pain. And it really bothered them that accessing capital was so inaccessible. And so they set out to democratize innovation resources like SBIR funding. So our first iteration, we started, and then we quickly started getting popularity because we made it so quick and easy to start finding and applying for SBIR funding. And I think at this point we have around 20,000 users, maybe more. And we've actively helped close to 2,000 find and apply for grants. We're at hundreds, like a ton of money raised. And we ourselves have about 12 SBIRs in total. So we have 3 phase 1s, 3 phase 2s, and multiple phase 3s. And we're a sub on a couple other phase 3s. And what we have basically evolved into is not only SBIR support. So yes, our tool is the fastest, easiest, and highest quality, and frankly, most affordable way to find and apply for SBIR opportunities. But because the government invested in our technology, and we're working with large corporates and tech transfer, and in general, we built a lot of market intelligence into our platform. So it helps with things like ideation, competitive landscaping, customer discovery, connecting with investors, understanding partners, finding subject matter experts to consult with, going ahead and understanding like funding trends and market landscapes, and launching your product. So we're helping with ideation, funding, and launch. And so it's one platform that basically does all the SBIR stuff, but will help you with the rest of it as well. And so I'm going to show you guys that platform. We have since absorbed Turbo SBIR, our first iteration, into the new platform called Turbo Innovate. So Turbo Innovate is the one place where you can go and you can identify SBIR opportunities, analyze your SBIR funding potential, seeing if you're even, gonna be funded, and within a minute, generate your proposal. So I'll show you what the tool looks like. Keep in mind that the Brink does have access to the tool, so they might be able to generate some stuff on your behalf, and so does Connect. But there's a lot of free access on the platform where you'll get some of the insights, identify SBIR opportunities, and there's other things that we can do for you guys if necessary. But we take into account everything everyone was saying on important things to do throughout the SBIR journey. Consider multiple agencies, find the right POC to talk with, make sure that you're bringing subject matter experts and bring in different technologies, and et cetera, and scaling your approach. So I will share my screen unless there's any questions, Jacques, over there.
We're good. You could
Cool.
go ahead and share your screen. So we have about a little less than 10 minutes left. So
I'll try to keep it quick.
thank you.
Yeah, and actually, I think if I wasn't such a yapper, you could literally use the platform for 2 minutes. Like within a minute, you could generate your SBIR proposal. Okay, so this is Turbo Innovate. As I mentioned, it has all the SBIR support stuff, but it has the market intelligence you need for commercialization. Now, I have basically what you'll do is go in and put in a description of a technology you're working on. I have a few here. So this is tracking brainwaves to detect early stage Alzheimer's. This one is laser systems to mass produce lig templates, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so I'll just create a new one so you can see. We'll do artificial intelligence for healthcare. within a second, what will happen is the tool will go ahead and take these descriptions and see, look how quick it is. You can just put in a sentence or two. And within a second, what it'll do is it will read through this description. It'll understand the technology behind it, and it'll actually scan through millions of, actually billions at this point, of innovation data points to give you a clear picture. So everything a consultant or whoever would research, right? Like patents, professors, publications, clinical trials, drug pipelines, like all the stuff that you would have to research, but automated with the artificial intelligence. So I'll quickly show you the types of data we have on our system and how those data points go into generating like an SBIR proposal. So let's click in here. So first, for you guys to see the types of data that we have on the system, you can put in a quick description of your technology. And then what you'll be able to do is actually scan through all this data to analyze your funding potential, partner potential, get contact information for investors, find grant opportunities, etc. And we have more data than any other platform. We have a lot of proprietary data because we've been doing this for years, and we have partnerships with the federal agencies. So there's data you wouldn't be able to access anywhere else. And most people, like, I mean, you pay for each of these databases, but we have it consolidated in one place. So first, you'll see data from like PitchBook and Crunchbase and websites and LinkedIn that'll show you all the companies in the space. You can filter by location, state, see international companies, and you can actually go ahead and get information on the company, like an evaluation. It takes us a couple seconds to load, but we evaluate each company. So you can go into in-depth dives on your competition, find contact information, and we do the same for investors. We have patent information here. We have investors, and so this includes anyone who's investing in the space. It can be like accelerators and VCs and micro VCs and private equity, but it could also just be like a corporate or a company that's putting money into the place. Then we have, for the SBIR side of things, really valuable information. So we already were recommended that we should look into previous awardees. That is super important. Seeing what has been funded by the agencies will show you what agencies have an appetite for your work, and it will show you what your niche should be in the federal space. So we have all the SBIR awardees, the SBIR awardees here, so you can really figure out where your niche is and what agencies you should apply to. Then we have federal contractors, so you can see who else is selling into the government, especially when you get to that like phase 3 level, when you want to sell into the government. That information is super important. We have licensable technologies from government labs. So if you ever want to enhance your technical offering, it's super valuable to see licensable technologies from academia and government. And of course, we have the data set that scans through all 700 billion in open grants and contracts. So this is going to show you the most relevant funding opportunities for you throughout the year. And so it really is a pain to even understand what is relevant for you on the SBIR space. This tool will track and show you what are the most relevant funding opportunities and keep you on top of them so you can apply in time. Then we have important data, right? Like making sure you're aware of industry trends and publications, finding professors and subject matter experts who can review your work or who can be brought on as a consultant, licensable technologies for technical enhancement. And then of course, I mean, we're working with like large biopharma and the NIH. So data on like clinical trials, international trials, drug pipelines are super, super important for us as well. And, you know, you can jump in and get a ton of information. It's super interesting. Anyway, so we have all this data, and what the data can do, right, is it's basically an automated research assistant. So any person worth their salt creating an SBIR proposal, like you have to realize that an SBIR is very much an argument for you getting funded, right? And so you need to build the evidence, and it's important to show your commercialization potential and your technical merit and your team. And so all of these data sets have been specially curated to make sure that not only are you competitive for funding, but you're able to build your company the right way for future success. Any questions so far on kind of the data or why we included it?
I think we're good. You could keep going.
Cool. Awesome. So we realized that we need to take it a step further. Previously, we didn't really have like in-depth reports. We just had the data, but then everyone was telling us like, oh, this data is incredibly powerful and it helps us generate our SBIR applications, or this data is super powerful, it helps us analyze our competition or do prior art searches. And we just thought, hey, like, why don't we analyze all the data and put it into write-ups? And so we have different write-ups available that will take into all of the verified scientific data, which means there's no hallucinations. It's all the data we've cleaned up and verified and have brought internal. So it's a big data moat for us. And then it'll generate write-ups. So we have things like competitive landscape and market sizing and clinical insights and market research report. And we're adding in a ton more. But can you imagine how many weeks of like it would take you to dive deep into the clinical insights or the kind of pain it takes to calculate your TAM-SAM-SOM, or the fact that you probably miss out on your competitors. Every time I mentor for companies in their pitch deck, the competition slide is always the weakest. And so the fact that this can be generated in 2 minutes, personalized and in depth, is super valuable. And that's important in general, right? It's important for you to understand your niche, understand your potential, so that you can build a better company, and better companies will be funded. And so we also do the SBIR type of work here instantly. So you can literally click into any of these, answer a few questions. You can also upload any previous submissions that you have, any documents that you have about your technology, any write-ups, et cetera, any sort of document, and it'll take that into account. And then basically within a couple minutes, it'll generate your entire SBIR proposal in terms of the content. We will give you the administrative document support. So is this, I think I did one somewhere here. Let's see.
And Caroline, we have maybe another minute or so before we need to wrap up.
Yeah, sounds good. So here's just an example of what was generated in like a minute. So the entire content for the SBIR with verified sources in a fully compliant structure with the expertise, like we've helped thousands of companies at this point, of what should go into each section, but again, automated. And then the administrative document support guiding you through step-by-step here through each module. So that's pretty much it. We have all this data that helps you build competitive SBIR proposals, helps you identify them. And we even have a free tier, which will be really useful for you guys. And the free tier, let me go on like a recent one. The free tier, what it'll do, and it just takes a second to load. Okay. The free tier, what it'll do is it'll analyze your market viability, so your commercial success. It will analyze your technology across your competitors. It will help you see your patentability score, so seeing if you're if you are likely to get patented based on other patent information, yada yada. So seeing where you are in your competition. It'll help you stay ahead of market news and insights. And you can generate your own custom insights here. You can iterate on your idea. Within a second, you'll see where government and private funding is going, your likelihood of funding, a potential investor or strategic to partner with, which agencies are the best agencies to target. Most people come to us and they say NIH, but they never think of DoD or NASA or USDA. And I don't think many people tend to realize the type of funding they can go after and scale. Relevant funding opportunities, partners, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an innovation news. So this is our free tier. So you can get pretty much the same insights I'm mentioning on our pay tier. Obviously, it's limited and you can't generate the SBIR proposals, but I would recommend that everyone jump in and just start understanding their competitive landscape and understanding what types of agencies they should start targeting. Hopefully I demoed that quick.
Thank you, Carol. You were covered a lot, Caroline. Thank you. So we appreciate your help. So that kind of concludes the whole journey. We went through an entire continuum of grants. Hopefully you have a better idea if you're going to apply for grants. A couple of things I want to leave you with. One, the SBIR workshop that Brink is offering next week. That's exactly where we coincide this event here. So if you're currently thinking to apply for a grant, I would highly recommend taking this course. All the other resources we mentioned earlier. We also here on campus, there's several centers. In this one here, we're here to assist you. So if you have need of help, you come by either this space or the 4th floor. And the last thing I'll leave you with, so you may have some questions. I know for the folks online, we'll make sure we'll answer those separately. We'll also share all the content as well as the recording of the sessions if you want to go back. And then the last thing I will leave you with is tomorrow we have this startup formation and investments here in the space. It's 4 to 5:30. Come by here and use the QR code to register, and then you'll have a chance to really dive in more into these legal questions, investment questions you may have. As you realize today, even though you're applying for a grant, it's important to also think about what is my customer, what are my legal elements I need to establish for this particular venture you might create over time. So Yeah, I want to thank all the speakers, obviously Stefan for helping us organize this, Matt that was online, Molly, thank you, Keith and Vicky and Caroline, and thank you everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.